April 16, 1945. A cellar beneath the shattered streets of Pankow, on the northern edge of Berlin. The world is dust and noise. Not the sharp, clean crack of a rifle, but a deep, unending groan that vibrates through the concrete floor, up through the soles of your worn leather boots, and settles in your teeth. It is the sound of a city dying. For 3 days, Anneliese Schwitt, a 23-year-old signals auxiliary of the Luftwaffe, has known only this cellar. Her world has shrunk to the smell of damp earth, stale sweat, and the faint, coppery scent of a wounded man's bandages in the corner. Her elegant blue-gray uniform, once a source of immense pride, is stained with grime and plaster dust. Her headset, her connection to a command structure that no longer exists, lies useless on a crate, its wires severed by shrapnel. Above them, the symphony of the end plays its final terrible chords. The basso profundo of Soviet 203mm howitzers, the shrieking staccato of Katyusha rockets, the locals call them Stalin's organs, and the incessant, chattering rage of machine gun fire. Every explosion sends a shower of dust from the ceiling. Anneliese flinches not at the sound, but at the silence that follows, a breathless moment where you wait for the ceiling to hold. She is with a handful of others. 2 elderly Volkssturm men, one with a trembling jaw, and the other with eyes that have seen too much. A Hitler Youth boy, no older than 15, clutching a Panzerfaust as if it were a holy relic. And 3 other women from her unit, Greta, pale and silent, and the formidable Oberscharführerin Lang, whose stern expression has finally begun to crack. The cellar door bursts inward, not with a bang, but a splintering crunch. It's not an explosion, it's a boot. The light that floods the stairwell is blinding, silhouetting a figure too broad, too solid to be German. He wears a strange, rounded helmet and carries a rifle that looks stubby, brutal, a PPSH-41. The red star is unmistakable. More shapes crowd in behind him. Russian. The Red Army is here. The Volkssturm man with the trembling jaw raises his rifle, a slow, arthritic movement. A burst of automatic fire, deafening in the enclosed space, throws him back against the wall. The Hitler Youth boy makes a move with his Panzerfaust, but a second soldier is on him, a rifle butt cracking against the side of his head with a sickening thud. He crumbles without a sound. A Soviet officer, younger than Anneliese expected, steps into the cellar. His eyes, dark and weary, sweep over the survivors. He barks an order in Russian. Hands up. Ruki vverch. The command needs no translation. Anneliese raises her hands, her arms feeling impossibly heavy. She watches as the soldiers roughly search Oberscharführerin Lang, pulling off her insignia. They are herded up the stairs and into the apocalyptic daylight. The street she knew is gone. It is a canyon of rubble, veiled in a greasy, black smoke that stings the eyes and throat. The sheer scale of the destruction is a physical blow. This is not defeat. This is annihilation. They are lined up against a skeletal wall, the remnants of a bakery. Anneliese avoids looking at the bodies sprawled in the gutters. She focuses on the soldier in front of her, his face young and grimy, his eyes holding a chilling mixture of exhaustion and cold fury. This is it, she thinks, the end foretold in all the frantic whispers, the fate promised to those who fell into Soviet hands. She closes her eyes, waiting for the shot. Instead, she feels a rough hand on her shoulder, shoving her forward. They are being moved, marched through the ruins with a growing column of captured soldiers, civilian men, and now women in uniform. Anneliese, Greta, and Frau Lang huddle together, a small island of familiar gray-blue in a sea of felt grau and civilian rags. They are prisoners. The word itself is an abstraction. What does it mean? Interrogation? A camp somewhere in the east? For now, it just means walking. 1 foot in front of the other, away from the thunder of the front line, and towards a future she cannot begin to imagine. The shock is a cold, heavy stone in her stomach, leaving no room for fear. May 2nd, 1945. A transit camp near Tempelhof Field. The cattle car door scrapes open, bathing the suffocating darkness in a rectangle of harsh gray light. For 2 days, the women had been packed inside, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels a maddening lullaby. The air, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and fear, is finally replaced by the clean, cool scent of a spring morning. But freedom is an illusion. Anneliese Schmidt stumbles out onto the gravel platform, her legs weak, her eyes struggling to adjust. Before her stretches a universe of mud and wire. It is not the frozen wasteland of Siberia she had dreaded, but it is a cage nonetheless. This is a temporary collection point, a human sorting station, run not by the Soviets, but by the Americans. Sometime during the chaos of Berlin's fall, their column had been handed over, a transaction of human lives conducted with a shrug and a signature. The American guards are different. Taller, cleaner, their movements casual, almost lazy. They chew gum and lean on their M1 Garens with an air of profound boredom. Their indifference is more unnerving than the Russians' open hostility. Anneliese and the other women from her Luftwaffe unit are separated from the male soldiers and herded into a separate enclosure. A vast tent, flapping in the wind, serves as their barracks. Inside, hundreds of women are already crammed onto straw-strewn bunks. Nurses from the Wehrmacht, secretaries from the SS administrative offices, operators from the Reichspost, even a few Flakhelferinnen, teenage girls who had manned anti-aircraft guns. It is a cross-section of the Third Reich's female servants, now stripped of rank and purpose, their faces etched with the same bewildered exhaustion. The days bleed into one another, a monotonous cycle of watery soup, stale bread, and endless waiting. They are registered, photographed, their names and former roles recorded on crisp American paperwork. Anneliese becomes prisoner 3719. Her identity is reduced to a number on a tag she must wear at all times. The initial shock of capture gives way to a listless, gnawing anxiety. Rumors spread like a fever through the tent. They will be sent home soon. They will be tried as war criminals. They will be used for forced labor to rebuild Russia. Each rumor carries a fresh wave of hope or despair. Oberscharführerin Lang, stripped of her authority, tries to maintain discipline, ordering the women to keep their small living space tidy, to wash as best they can in the cold water troughs. But her commands are hollow now, echoes from a world that has ceased to exist. Most women simply lie on their bunks, staring at the canvas ceiling, lost in their own private landscapes of memory and fear. Anneliese spends hours watching the Americans. They are so young, so confident. They laugh loudly, play cards, and listen to strange rhythmic music on the radio. They seem like boys playing at war, oblivious to the gravity of their victory. They treat the prisoners not with cruelty, but with a distant, almost clinical detachment, like a farmer managing livestock. This is what it is to be utterly defeated. You are no longer an enemy to be fought, but a problem to be managed. One afternoon, a new kind of activity breaks the monotony. A jeep pulls up near their enclosure, and 2 American officers, a captain and a lieutenant, step out carrying clipboards. A female interpreter, a German woman in civilian clothes with a hard, unsympathetic face, accompanies them. A sergeant barks an order, and the prisoners are assembled in the muddy yard. The captain begins to speak, his English words translated into clipped, impersonal German. He is not talking about repatriation. He is not talking about interrogations. He is talking about work. He explains that under the Geneva Convention, prisoners of war can be required to perform labor. Anneliese's stomach tightens. She glances at Greta, whose eyes are wide with alarm. Labor? What kind of labor? The interpreter starts reading names from the clipboard. Each name is followed by a destination. Schmidt, Anneliese. Destination, United Kingdom. Assignment, agricultural support. The words hang in the air, nonsensical. United Kingdom? England? The land of the enemy? The target of their V-2 rockets? And agricultural support. It sounds sanitized, bureaucratic. A quiet dread begins to settle over her. This is not the idleness of a prisoner waiting for the war's end. This is something else entirely. A new kind of servitude in a foreign land for the benefit of her enemies. The barbed wire horizon has just expanded, stretching across the sea to an unknown fate. July 10th, 1945. Featherstone Park Camp, Northumberland, England. The North Sea air is a shock. It is cold and wet, thick with the smell of salt and damp soil, a world away from the dust of Berlin. The journey had been a disorienting blur. A long train ride through a ruined Germany, a ferry crossing the choppy English Channel, and another train winding its way north through a countryside impossibly, offensively green. Anneliese Schmidt stands in the assembly yard of Camp 18, Featherstone Park, a sprawling city of Nissen huts nestled in the shadow of Hadrian's Wall. The camp was built for Italian POWs, then housed Americans preparing for D-Day. Now, its new inhabitants are German women. She looks at the faces around her, the same women from the transit camp in Berlin. Greta is beside her, shivering in the thin tunic they've been issued. Oberscharführerin Lang stands stiffly, her face a mask of disbelief. They are issued their new uniforms, not the familiar Luftwaffe blue-gray, but coarse brown wool trousers and a matching jacket, with a large colored patch sewn onto the back, a diamond of fabric that marks them as property, visible from a distance. It is rough, ill-fitting, and deeply humiliating. It is the uniform of a laborer, not a soldier. Their first few days are for processing, medical checks, delousing, a procedure that strips away the last vestiges of dignity. Lectures from the camp commandant, a British major with a clipped mustache and tired eyes, who explains the rules through an interpreter. No fraternization with the guards, no attempts to escape. Work assignments are not optional. Disobedience will be punished. The camp itself is a machine of routine. The clang of a bell at 0500 hours, a breakfast of porridge and weak tea, roll call in the damp morning mist, and then the work. Annaliese's group is assigned to a local farm a few miles from the camp. They are marched out each morning under the watchful eyes of 2 British guards, older men from the Pioneer Corps, armed with rifles they carry with a practiced weariness. The local villagers stop and stare as they pass, their faces a mixture of curiosity and hostility. Anneliese feels their eyes on her, on the patch on her back. She is a spectacle of defeat. The farm is a panorama of mud and toil. Their task is to harvest potatoes. The farmer, a grim-faced man named Henderson, shows them what to do with a few grunts and gestures. They are given forks and sacks and pointed towards an endless field of dark, heavy soil. Anneliese had grown up in Hamburg, a city girl who knew vegetables only from the market. The first time she drives the fork into the earth, the shock of the resistance travels up her arms. The work is brutal, relentless. Her back aches within the first hour. Her hands, accustomed to the delicate work of a switchboard, are soon raw and blistered. The damp cold seeps into her bones, a permanent chill that the watery midday soup does little to dispel. She works alongside Greta, their movements becoming a grim, synchronized rhythm. Dig, lift, shake, sort. The potatoes, caked in mud, are heavy and unforgiving. The sheer physicality of it is stunning. In Germany, her service had been a matter of intellect and patriotism. She was part of the sophisticated nerve center of the Luftwaffe, a skilled operator connecting pilots and commanders. Her contribution was clean, technical, important. This is peasants' work. This is what the conquered are made to do. As she kneels in the mud, her hands bleeding, her body screaming with a fatigue she has never known, the full weight of her situation crashes down on her. The shock is no longer abstract. It is the burn in her muscles, the grit under her fingernails, the profound humiliation of toiling to feed the nation that had destroyed her own. One afternoon, Oberscharführerin Lang refuses to work. She stands ramrod straight in the middle of the field and declares, in defiant German, that she is a non-commissioned officer and that forcing her to perform manual labor is a violation of the Geneva Convention. The British guard, a corporal with a drooping mustache, simply sighs. He calls the farmer over. There is no argument, no shouting. Farmer Henderson walks up to her, looks her up and down, and then, with a swift movement, empties a bucket of pig slop over her head. Lang stands there, dripping and stunned into silence as the guards lead her away to solitary confinement on bread and water. The other women watch, their faces impassive. There is no protest. They have learned their first lesson. Their old ranks, their old identities mean nothing here. They are simply bodies, here to work until they are told to stop. October 28, 1945. A laundry facility attached to a British military hospital, Yorkshire. The potato harvest ended with the first autumn frosts. Anneliese Schmidt and her group were transferred. The new camp is larger, more institutional, and the new work is indoors. She had felt a flicker of hope. Anything had to be better than the freezing mud of the Northumberland fields. She was wrong. The laundry is a cavernous brick building, a vision of hell imagined by Dante. The air is perpetually thick with steam, so dense it is difficult to see across the vast concrete floor. It carries the chemical stench of lye soap and bleach mixed with the sickeningly sweet metallic smell of blood and disinfectant from the hospital linens. The noise is a constant, deafening roar. The churning of industrial washing machines, the hiss and clatter of massive steam presses, and the shouting of the British overseers. Her new uniform is a simple cotton shift, perpetually damp. Her skin is always slick with sweat. Her hands, which had just begun to heal from the harvest, are now plunged into scalding water for hours on end, becoming red, swollen, and cracked. The work is divided into a production line of misery. First, the sorting. Anneliese and dozens of other women stand over huge canvas bins, using wooden tongs to separate sheets, bandages, and surgical gowns stiff with dried blood and other bodily fluids. They are ghosts of the war, these linens, silent witnesses to the suffering in the hospital wards next door. Men who were their enemies, torn apart by the weapons of their countrymen. The irony is a bitter pill she swallows every day. After sorting comes the washing, feeding the monstrous machines that rumble and shake the very foundations of the building. Then the drying rooms, blasts of scorching air that leave you gasping. Finally, the folding. Endless stacks of crisp white sheets folded with military precision under the unforgiving eye of a British matron. The days are a blur of steam and sweat and the rhythmic, mindless motion of her own hands. Fold, stack, repeat. Fold, stack, repeat. The mind goes numb. You cease to think about home, about the past, about the future. You think only of the next sheet, the next stack, the next shrill blast of the whistle that signals a 10-minute break. In the fields, there had been the sky, the wind, the changing seasons. Here, there is only the roar of the machines and the oppressive, damp heat. The shock has calcified into a dull, permanent ache of resignation. The other women have changed too. Greta has grown thin and silent, her movements mechanical, her eyes vacant. Some women find ways to resist. They work slowly, they accidentally damage a machine, they feign illness. But the system is brutally efficient. Slow workers are put on half rations, saboteurs are sent to solitary. The sick are examined by a skeptical British doctor who has seen every trick. Survival means compliance. It means becoming a cog in their machine. Tensions simmer within their own ranks. The old hierarchies of the Third Reich have dissolved, replaced by a new, brutal social order based on survival. Women who can scrounge an extra piece of bread or curry favor with a guard are both envied and despised. Arguments break out over a misplaced piece of soap, a stolen glance, a whispered word. Anneliese learns to keep to herself, to build a wall inside her mind where she can retreat. During the folding, her hands moving on autopilot, she recites poetry she learned in school, she reconstructs the streets of her Hamburg neighborhood, she replays conversations with her father before he was sent to the Eastern Front. It is a desperate act of self-preservation, a refusal to let prisoner 3719 completely erase Anneliese Schmidt. One evening, collapsing onto her bunk, every muscle screaming in protest, a younger woman in the bunk opposite her begins to weep quietly. She is a new arrival, barely 19, captured in the final days. "I was a secretary," she whispers in the dark, her voice choked with disbelief. "I typed memos for a Luftwaffe quartermaster. Why are they making us do this?" Anneliese says nothing. There is no answer to give. The question itself belongs to another lifetime. Here, there is no why. There is only the clang of the bell at dawn, the roar of the machines, and the endless, crushing rhythm of defeat. May 11th, 1947. A train crossing the border into the British zone of occupied Germany. 2 years. 2 years of bells and whistles, of mud and steam, of calloused hands and a hollowed-out heart. The war has been over for 2 years, but for Anneliese Schmidt and the thousands of other German women held in Britain, it ended only last week. The news of their impending repatriation had spread through the camp not like a wildfire, but like a slow, cautious thaw. No one dared to believe it at first. Hope had become too dangerous a commodity. But then came the official announcement, the final delousing, the issuance of threadbare civilian clothes, and the march to the train station. Now, she sits by the window of a third-class carriage, watching the English countryside give way to the flattened, scarred landscape of her homeland. The other women in the carriage are quiet, wrapped in their own thoughts. They are no longer a unit, no longer a collective of prisoners. They are individuals again, and the prospect is terrifying. The work had become their world. The brutal, mindless routine of the laundry had, perversely, become a kind of certainty in a world that had none. It was a structure that demanded nothing of them but their physical endurance. It had stripped them of their pasts and absolved them of their futures. Within that structure, a strange, unspoken camaraderie had formed. A shared glance over a pile of bloody sheets, a secretly passed crust of bread, a moment of synchronized defiance in working just a fraction slower when the matron's back was turned. They had learned to survive together. Now, that was over. Anneliese looks at her hands, resting in her lap. They are not the hands of a signals operator. They are thick, the palms hardened with calluses, the nails permanently grimed. They are the hands of a stranger. Who is she now? She is not the idealistic young patriot who joined the Luftwaffe Helferinnen. She is not prisoner 3719. She is a woman returning to a country she no longer knows, to find a family she may no longer have. The train slows as it pulls into Hamburg Hauptbahnhof, or what is left of it. The roof is a twisted skeleton of steel girders, open to the gray sky. Anneliese steps onto the platform and is engulfed by the reality of the Stunde Null, 0 hour. This is not the proud, bustling city of her memory. It is a ghost town of hollowed-out buildings and mountains of rubble where entire streets used to be. The people are thin, their faces gray with hunger and exhaustion. They move with a slow, shuffling gait, their eyes downcast. The victorious allies are everywhere. British soldiers in their khaki uniforms, directing traffic, overseeing food distribution. Her former captors are now the masters of her city. She finds the address of her family's apartment building. It doesn't exist anymore. In its place is a crater filled with stagnant water. A neighbor, a stooped old woman Anneliese vaguely recognizes, tells her the news with a detached weariness. Her parents were killed in the firebombing of 1943. Her brother never came back from Russia. She is utterly alone. In the weeks that follow, Anneliese drifts. She lives in a displaced persons camp, sleeping on a cot in a vast hall with hundreds of other lost souls. She finds that her experience as a POW is a strange, unwelcome story. Other Germans look at her with a mixture of pity and suspicion. They endured the bombing, the starvation, the invasion. Her suffering happened over there, in the hands of the enemy, and somehow it seems less valid. The shock she and the other women had felt at being forced into menial labor, at having their status and identity so brutally erased, finds no sympathy here. Everyone has lost their status. Everyone's identity has been erased. Her personal humiliation is just one small story in a national cataclysm. One day, looking for work, she sees a notice. The British Occupation Authority is hiring German civilians for clerical work. They need typists, translators, laundry supervisors. She stands there, staring at the paper. The ultimate irony. The skills she was forced to learn as a prisoner, the rhythm of labor beaten into her, are now the very things that might allow her to survive. She is no longer a victim of the enemy's system. She must now willingly join it to eat. The war did not end for her upon capture. It did not end upon her release. It is a slow, quiet unraveling that will continue for the rest of her life, a constant negotiation with the woman she was, the prisoner she became, and the stranger who must now live in the ruins.